Jesus, this morning we bless your holy name. We thank you for this morning, King of Glory. We come before you just as we want to speak of your word. Use my vocal cords. Use me, Jehovah, my Father, to speak the message, to speak the truth that comes from you every morning. Just as we receive manna, Jehovah, my Father, that will nourish our soul, will nourish our spirit, and make us actually grow into knowing you, desiring more of your word, desiring more of you, and growing into becoming like you. I just want to invite somebody out there to Virtual Church International. Karibuni sana. We just want to thank God this morning because of the beautiful things that God is doing in our life today. Just as we start the day, we just want to thank Him because God is wonderful. He cares for each one of us, and He desires that we grow into knowing Him more. Every morning, there is something good that God is doing, and I just glorify Him because if you are sensitive, just as I was saying yesterday, you are connected to Him, and if then you are connected, it means every morning when you wake up, you're willing and ready to receive. This morning, before you start anything, I would desire that you seek God's voice. Seek His voice. He has something. He has something for you. Thing about your life will be fully be transformed. And therefore, today I just want to share with you something about the royal law. The royal law. There are many laws in the Bible that we talk about. They are what we call the ceremonial law that Moses was given, and these commands. And what were the essence of these commands? Praise the name of the Lord. Then there is the royal law. And this royal law, if you look at the word royal, it means it was like a decree that would have come from the king. It's a decree that was declared by the king, and there was some expectations that the king expected everybody to follow and to adhere. And for it was not for them just to adhere, but it was for their well-being. Praise the name of the Lord. And so God gave us a royal decree. There is a royal decree that in the scriptures, this is the only thing that God points everything towards. He points us towards this one law. And this law is a decree that He has given from the beginning up to the time when we talk about, when we're reading the book of Revelation, the essence of everything revolves around this law. Praise the name of the Lord. Now, maybe some people are thinking that I'm talking about a law that you have to do something. Today, I'm in the business of actually telling you that yes, Moses came up with the law, but it was only through Jesus that the truth and the faithfulness and the love of God, or this royal decree, it was when Jesus appeared that then He pointed us to this royal decree. So God is calling us that we may really understand what this royal decree is. Because if we don't understand the royal decree, even if you're a Christian, even if you're a believer, and you don't understand this royal law, then every other thing you're doing will be in vain. Paul speaks about this royal decree, and he talks about it, and he says that it is the most important decree. So when we look at what a royal decree is, when a king would decree something, and it was royally decreed, then everybody was to adhere to that. No one was expected, not even himself. He would actually defy a royal decree. He said it, he kept it. And so each of them that were under the king would actually have to adhere to what the king had declared. So even as today, we must understand what a royal decree is. Yes, we live in a democracy, and in the democracy, our bills and laws are made by our parliamentarians, and it is based on lobbying of agreements from the different parties. Today in our country, we are talking about the BBI and building bridges. But then I'm looking at that and I'm like, as much as it may have some intentions, they are already contentions from different quarters of people actually either disagreeing on a few issues that have been declared. But then the totality of everything is that that does not really make life or change so much of anything in our life, because it's just a few people's views on what they think that life or the way we should actually govern or rule or maybe manage the resources of our country, and who and what should be put in place to ensure that those things are fundamentally considered important to join us in a common objective. And I think that's what the main overview picture is all about. But then one of the things I would actually come across and ask in my own, and even the leaders of the church should ask, is, do we really understand the royal law? Is it considered in everything? The royal law is a principle that God has already set for man to live with. You can't actually live without this law. The essence of everything revolves around this law, the royal law of God. Even if we set up instruments, if we set up intentions that are looking proper and good, even in the world today, anything will work, yes. But then the only thing that will actually preserve all things and bring us to that place of living a better life that we also as human beings is by understanding the royal law. It is not by the things we purport on our selfish interest. It is until we understand the royal law that's when things will actually work. Or else we will still be bargaining and fighting on the basis of opinions. And that is what actually is currently happening. God doesn't work in a democracy. He is a monarch and he's a king. And so if he gives a royal decree, if Job, in the book of Job, we are told, can you advise God on when he was creating heaven and earth, and declare and say that the way you created the sea or how you created the sun and everything that you created, who can advise God? Who can come down and advise God and tell God that whatever you have decreed is not proper? Who can advise God? It is also declared in the book of Psalms. So when there is a royal decree, we all, including all living things, must toe their line to that. But the most important thing is that the royal decree was not talked to animals. It was talked to the human being who was created by God. Today in the morning, as I was meditating and reflecting, God was like, you are a spirit. You live in a body. You have a soul. You have a mind. You have a mind. You can think. You can do everything. But in actual essence, you are a spirit. And so the royal decree was given by a higher spirit, who is Jesus Christ, who is God. It's God himself. He is a spirit, and he has given us a royal decree. So then when we actually want to actually live life that is above, that is superior, remember, Jesus says, I came that I may give you life and give you in abundance. He's a spirit who came to give us life that is to eternity. A royal decree can never be changed because it is for now and it is also for eternity. But it is much more effectual if we understand it. It's prudent if we understand it now. That's why then I will give you the knowledge of understanding that there is a royal law that God has mandated each and every one of us, beyond our government institution, beyond our normal life, our daily living. There is a law, a royal law that God has declared. Let us see what the Bible says in the book of James and chapter 2. And I want us to read from the book of James chapter 2, and I will pinpoint some key areas that will actually be addressing the issue of the royal law. So this morning, as I encourage you, I just want you to look at your life and ask yourself, do I know what the royal law is? And do I understand what the royal law is? Some of you will find it fascinating that this is what the law is. So I just want us to go to the book of James. Many other areas, many other verses that I would have read, But then I want to thank God because of this. He actually brought it in my heart this morning, and I'm actually meditating and reflecting on it, because then the essence of everything revolves around this law. Praise the name of the Lord. So then let us look at the book of James, chapter 2. The Bible says, if we start from verse 5, listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor of the world to be rich in faith? Aren't they the ones that will inherit the kingdom he promised, those who love him? Okay, but you dishonor the poor. Isn't the rich who oppress you and drag you into court? Aren't they the ones who slander Jesus Christ, whose noble name you bear? So in verses 8, it says, yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal law found in the scriptures. When you obey the royal law, yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal law found in the scriptures. And what is the royal law? It says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is the royal law. God has not given us any other law other than this, that he expects us to obey and to follow. If you are actually looking for any other law, then this is the law I'm giving you today. If we look at the 10 Commandments, Jesus in himself, one person comes to him, and in several parts of the gospel, this man who comes and says, I have obeyed the law. I have obeyed all the commandments. And Jesus says, that's very good. But then there is one thing that he discovers, that as much as somebody would declare that they have obeyed the law, is that by keeping and walking by the law. Because when you look at the law, the Bible says the letter killeth. What it means is that when you looked at the 10 Commandments as the way they were, and you wanted to follow them, then you actually were leading yourself to death, because no one could keep the commandments. No one kept the law. No one kept the 10. Immediately Moses goes up to the mountain and he comes back. As much as he had these laws, he found them already disobeying God. The first one was that they had already created a graven image. And God said, you will not set up any other, or even come up with any graven image other than the one, other than him. But immediately he comes, already there was an idol. There was already an idol. And so they had already broken the commandments. And as you keep on reading, the Bible keeps on saying that in verse 10 it says, for a person who keeps all the laws except one is guilty as a person who has broken the laws. That is in verse 10. So for the same God said, you must not commit adultery. Also said, you must not murder. So if you murder someone but do not commit adultery, you have still broken the law. So it was so tight and so difficult in those days to keep the law. Jesus also points it out. He says that you say that I have broken the Sabbath, but then you circumcise on a Sabbath. You circumcise on a Sabbath, which means you're still also working. For me, healing somebody on a Sabbath, it is termed offensive, and you want to kill me. Yet you say we must obey the law. It was so difficult and so